Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys the upgrade process for going from World Time 0.4.1 to 1.0.0. So World Time is my plugin for controlling time, setting time of day transitions, and aging game objects inside of your game world for games being built in Godot 4. So to demo the upgrade process, I'm going to actually just be upgrading one of my own projects. So if I check project settings, you'll see here that for world time, I currently have this at 0.4.1. So we'll be starting from that point. So a couple of resources you're going to want to save to your project before you upgrade so that they don't disappear is the times of day, which originally these were set in an array, which would sit inside of the day-night cycle system, but now they're grouped in a times of day set resource. So the array is going to go away because it was moved into here. So you want to right-click each of your times of day and save those into your project, just somewhere that you can bring them in. And then those same times of day, we're just going to bring them right back in to the times of day set resource in an array in much the same way. So the reason for the set resource is just that as a resource file, it can be easily shared and referenced between different objects inside of your project that would be concerned with that times of day data. Whereas with an array, you would have to reference each of these times of day resources individually as you add them all back in one at a time. Okay, so in much the same way, if you have a time of day light in your project, then you're going to want to take each of the time of day light settings, and you could save those to your project with right-click Save As. And then you can take those and do right-click Save As into your project. Now you can see that the ones I have at the end of this tutorial are actually locally stored within the outdoor light settings 1 resource. So the light settings are all being combined basically under a light settings group here, which stores the array and therefore will store all of these other resources. So after the plugin update, you won't really have to store all of these light settings in their own resources. I would still store the time of day in their own referenceable resources because those need to be brought in here for these light settings. But the light settings are mostly going to just apply to one light or maybe a different light in your game. So you can just save those as one giant group resource. So once again, the main resource for these change is that if you have a group of resources, it's a lot easier to just grab them in a parent resource than it is to try to reference each item from the array, because you can't save the array as a resource. So it's a lot harder to share and maintain the same values between different objects that need these, because you have to do it one at a time. So as long as you save your time of day light settings so they don't disappear when you switch to the new version of the plugin 1.0, and you save your time of days, then you should be able to just bring them right back in to fill in the new resource. So inside of the current project, I can go to Resources, Add-ons, and find where I have World Time installed, which should be in the add-ons /world_time. And before I remove this, I want to go up to Project Settings, and Disable World Time. Okay, now I am going to right-click here and open it in File Manager. And going up a level, I'm just going to actually clear out the whole folder just to have a fresh reset as we upgrade to the new version. And then wherever you have the zip file downloaded with the new version, we just open that up and bring in world time here. And you should do all of this without going back into Godot. And then we go back into Godot, we want to go to Project Settings and now enable the 1.0 version. So you'll probably see a few errors pop up regarding the UIs from the old version as they've been updated to include new resources inside of the inspector. So clicking on my DateTime display over here, which uses the DateTime display GD script, the same one from the plugin, then you'll see that it now needs to reference a state, or more specifically, a time state. So time signal buses no longer exist. They've been replaced with the time state, which has the signals, but also records the current values of time within the game world, which makes it easier to immediately reference those values whenever a new object enters the scene. So that same pattern also is going to affect the time of day display. Same thing here, you need to reference a time state, or more specifically, the world's time state. So where are we getting those from? If we go up to the game time system, then we'll see that in the inspector here, we have 3 empty resources for world time state, time movement settings. So all of the settings of the game time system have been moved inside of this resource. And then the game calendar, which is going to be shared and referenced between our systems, and that handles all of the calculations for time for your game world. And then in day-night cycle system, we can see similarly, we want to reference the same world time state as the game time system. We can set up a times of day set resource. So the array has been replaced with a resource that contains the set, and we reference the same calendar here. For the world age system, when after a set amount of time, you want objects in your game to increase their age by 1 or more, then you would go in here and you have aging settings. So the settings of the world age system now stored within a resource. The world age state, this replaces the aging signal bus. And the world time state, that's going to be the same resource we reference over on the game time system. So the state is also being shared between the systems as well as your UI. And then the calendar, of course, is going to be the same one here. So a lot of empty resources, but we can actually set it up pretty quickly. So now for actually creating the new resources on the game time system, I'm going to want to create a new time state here. We can expand it, and you'll see a bunch of empty fields, or really these are nested resources as well. But we don't need to manually set those because the game time system and the day-night system are going to update those as soon as the game starts and set the values appropriately. So one of the advantages of having this data in here now, not only can it be shared across basically everything in your game without referencing a node directly, but also we can take these resources and save it not only in the editor, but also if you need to save your game state to a file, then the time state can just be part of your overall save file. So basically you can use resource loader and resource saver as an option for doing that, or other methods for saving your game. But the data will all be here. So what we need to do with the time state here is reference it in our other UI and systems. So I'm going to right click on the time state and we're going to save it in the project. So if you haven't already created one already, you're going to need a directory for storing your resources, your shared resources. So for me, I'm going to go into systems and I'll create a folder here for state. And for the resource name, I want to call it worldtimestate.tres. Okay, so now you see the name of this time state is worldtimestate.tres. So that references the file in our project, which makes it super easy to find. So we can go to day-night cycle system, and we could search the project for that same name. So world time state and then .tres, and we can drag and drop that in here as we need it for the day-night cycle system. Or I can show you another way. On the world age system, where we need the world time state, we can just click here and quick load from our project the world time state.tres. So this menu already filters the resources to assign here based on type, and this is a time state. We need that, so open that up. And that's basically how you can share your resources across your different systems or UI. Let's also assign that to the time of day display and the date time display. So for me, I've customized the look here a little bit, but the code is still the same. It's still running the datetime display.gd. So for the state, we just have to assign here quick load world time state. Okay, now that's set here, so it'll be able to read this state and know what date time we're currently working with as set by the game time system. Time of day display. Let's quick load world time state. And we're pretty much good to go for that. So let's go back to the game time system and do everything else. Time movement settings. We want to create a new one here. And all of the properties that you would set in the game time system before have basically been moved in here. So notably the game speed, this will be an easy way to reference it. So if you use the world speed control, which was previously called the world speed slider, and you want to just be able to control the game speed with a slider bar at the bottom, then that'll reference this setting, and it'll be able to update this setting as well. But that data basically stays here inside of the movement settings here. So once again, no longer referencing the system directly, but we just reference the resource data wherever we need it. So most likely you want auto change day and auto increment time left on so that your game day and time will progress automatically. But you can turn that off if you need to manually adjust the time, or you can just pause the game and the systems should stop processing as well. Okay, and then lastly, for the game calendar, if you want to create your own custom game calendar with its own months and days, then you can click on the dropdown and create your own custom calendar. But if you just want to use like a standard real world calendar, then you can quick load and just find the default game calendar from within the plugin. So if we use that and expand here, then you'll see that there is 1 day here, and the days are basically set up to match the real world. Now note that this doesn't account for leap years. So if you wanted to have a leap year, you would simply have 4 years, and the first 3 would be the default game year, and then the fourth one would just be the same, but February would be 29 days if you wanted that for some reason. And this should be 4 in the array, so I need to delete that fourth one right there. So you would have 0 through 3, that's 4 years, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, and then the leap year. But we're going to keep that as the default. You may also notice that there is a default time scale already set up here. So if you want to control how many seconds are in a minute, minutes are in an hour, or hours are in a day, then you can customize that here or on your own custom game calendar. In most cases, I don't think there's really a need to do that, and that's why previously I didn't actually have this exposed. But I could imagine that there would be some weird game out there that would want to customize that, so I did make it available if you want to do that for some reason. So that's basically the game time system setup. Now let's go down to day-night cycle system. So times of day. As before, you would still have an array of times of day, but now they're stored within a set resource. So why are they in a set resource? Because it's easier to save and reference one resource than it is an array of resources, because you can't right-click and save an array, but you can right-click and save a resource. So that's why they're all stored inside of here now. So whatever times of day you had before, and I'll search my project, I think I was calling them time of day, then we can see I actually already I already saved them as individual resources here. So I can just drag them back in to their array slots as I need. So dawn, daytime, dusk time, and nighttime, and that's set up for you. If you need to create your times of day, you can select them, give them a name, their enter time as represented by hours time, so think 24 hours time. So if you want it to start being dawn at 6 a.m., then you make the hour 6, or in minutes and seconds, so forth. So the transition duration, how long do you want it to take to go fully into dawn time? So currently this is mostly for the lighting settings. There'll be a background progress tracker where between hours 6 and in this case 8, because the duration is 2 hours, it'll keep track of how far into that 2 hours progress is it already. So at 7 hours, it would be 50%, and that value can be used for controlling things like the light in your game. Okay, and the color here doesn't represent the light color, but just how you want it to display, and places like this time of day display up here. So it's more the color associated with the time of day, not the color associated with the light. That would be in the time of day light settings. So if you have your times of day set up, you can have as many or few as you want here. Then we can just minimize that. And next you just need to set the calendar. So once again, we're going to share the same game calendar across our different systems. So I'm going to quick load the default game calendar, and that's all you need to do. So in world age system, we need to create a world age state. So I'm going to create here a new age state. Now note here another major difference between the age state and the aging signal bus from the previous versions is that there will be local age states for aging components and the like. And there's also the world age state. So you have the age of the world, and then you have the age of each object that gets created within the world. So they both use an age state resource, but the time at which they get created and the scope of them is going to vary, obviously. So you can kind of think of the world age state as going to be controlling the initial time, as in the created time of all of the local age states within the game. And it does that by setting the created on the local state to the total of the world age state. So because we're going to reference the world age state and any aging components in our game, we want to right click and save this. So I'll go back to System, State, and save the world age state TRES into there. And now, once again, it's very easy to reference. Same way as the world time state. Anytime we need the world age state, we can save and reference that again. So for settings concerning the system, we're going to create a new aging settings resource. So the main thing here is controlling how often you want the age to occur. You can think of the age as an arbitrary value of time. So by default, we can see that this is using date changed, as in the age only goes up when the day officially changes. And it does that by using the signals on the world time state, by the way. The interval unit, so in this case, is a day. So if 1 day occurs, then our interval unit is 1 day. How many days or intervals do we need per age? 1. So this is going to mean that every time the day increases, the age of each world state and local age state is going to increase by 1 within the game. So you can change that, of course. So if you want game time elapsed, just a number of seconds that occur within the game for the age to change, then you can change that to seconds. And you could say like 600 seconds. And then you could say something like 600 seconds. So now every 600 seconds of game time, the age is going to go up by 1. So I'm going to revert everything back to the default here. And you can also see allowing negative age changes as an option. So if your game, for any reason, ever goes backwards in time, and you want to allow age to decrease on your components in your world age, then you can enable that here as an option. But once again, I feel like that would be pretty niche. Even if your game has some kind of time traveling element, you may want to leave this off still. So if your date changes and it goes back a year, for instance, but you still wanted, let's say, your crops to be at the same growth stage, then you may choose not to have negative age changes, so that those crops are still, let's say, 50 days old, even after you revert the time. So it's up to you if that's something you're looking for, if you want the age to change, or if you want it to stay the same with your time traveling element. Okay, so then we need the calendar once again. So just assigning the default game calendar there. And that is the 3 systems basically set up. So going down, we can double check the date time display here, and the time of day display here as well. If your date time display didn't have time format settings, and it probably did if you're just upgrading, then you can just create a new resource here. So this is how do you want your time to display. So with this string, what basically happens is that it'll give 2 digits for your seconds, minutes, hours, day, month, and then year is displayed with 4 digits. So even if it's day 1, you're always going to get 2 digits, and even if it's year 1, you're always going to get 4 years with these default settings. And you can customize those if you need to. If you need to reference them in other areas, then you can right-click and save it. But right now, if I want to do that, I need to right-click here and make this resource unique. And that's also how you would unlock these values for being able to be edited. So now if we needed to save it into the project as a resource, we can do that, and we can share the same values with any other UI that's going to be displaying time values. One more thing to update in our main UI hierarchy here, we can see that my world speed control, which is using the world speed slider.gd script, went missing. That's because I renamed the script and the accompanying UI scene to control instead of slider, just to imply that it's more than just a slider. It also has the rich text label associated. So to fix that, we just need to bring it back in from the plugin. So if we search for world speed control and we drag this into our scene here, then basically we can just have that again. And we just need to bring it in with its new name. So I'm going to rename it, and then let's put the layout at the bottom left. I'll hit W to move it, and let's offset it a little bit. And for the node now, it references time movement settings instead of the game time system directly. So for the game time system, I'm going to want to right-click on the time movement settings and save it. So I might go to System and create a folder for Settings. And then inside of here, Time Movement Settings. Most likely we'll only have one for our project, and we just share the data between our elements that need it. Then we go to the World Speed Control, click on the drop-down Quick Load, and we reference that Time Movement Settings. And for the most part, that's all you really need to do to update this. So before it referenced the game time system, now it references the time movement settings that's shared with the game time system. This is just more convenient because you can have the UI exist in a totally separate scene, reference the same resource, and when you bring everything together, it'll still be able to work without needing to know anything directly about the game time system. That's basically one of the big advantages of resources over nodes when you don't need process or ready functions in general. Just that they can be shared across your project by having saved files. So that sets everything in our UI and systems up. But if I go to my woods level, we can see I had a time of day directional light. So this needs to be updated as well. We can see the time state and the light settings are empty here. So the time state which time state are we using in order to control the light? Well, that is going to be the world time state, of course. So let's quick load the world time state. And then for light settings, where we had an array of time of day light settings before, we now have a time of day light settings group. And if we create that and expand it, you can see that the array from before is inside of here. So in my project, I didn't right-click save my light settings, so I could just search them. So I'll go ahead and recreate them again, and I'll be sure to make a note at the start of the video that you actually should save them before you upgrade, for this reason of having to recreate the resources. But it shouldn't be too bad in this case. So I create a new time of day light settings. So I need to associate H light settings with a time of day. So let's quick load the time of days. So we have dawn. What color do we want the light to be showing at dawn? Let's say kind of a light blue. And then we'll set the energy to 0.85. And then I will right click and save this within our project. So I might create a folder for lights. And in here, I'll say light settings. And we can say dawn light settings and save that. So this also means that we can reference the specific light settings anywhere we need it, like another light. But the easier thing to do would actually just be to save the whole light settings group. So if we right click here and save that inside of here, we can say outdoors light settings, and let's just give it a 1 here. So all of these settings will basically determine how we want our lights to work when we're outdoors. So let's create the rest of these time of day light settings. And so we can load the day. We'll say color is white, energy is 1, next light, next settings, and then we do dusk. We'll give this more of a darker purple and say 0.85 for the energy. And then nighttime. If we just go nighttime here, we could say energy of 0.7, so it's going to be a bit darker, and then we make the color something like a darker purple. So we have all of these light settings now. And I might actually not really need to save the individual light settings because they're already being saved in this light settings group. So what you can do if you don't want to have too many unnecessary saved resources is just leave them nested here. And for this one that's already been saved, I'll right click it and make it unique. And that means it's no longer using the one that's saved in the project. And then we search dawn, and I go down here to the dawn light settings, and we can just actually delete that because we're not going to need it anymore. Okay, and just making sure that in the light settings, our outdoor light settings 1 is saved there. And then we can collapse everything. So having this group saved to the project just means that these settings are reusable. And also if you happen to delete your light for whatever reason, well, they'll be saved right in the project for you to reuse again. And you can just assign it with the quick load, like so. So I think that's pretty much going to be it for the setup. So if we hit play, we can see that the nighttime lighting is very dark and purple, which is what we would expect. So time is progressing as we would expect. I'm going to increase the time of day speed so we can see the light transitions as we go between nighttime and daytime. So we can see that's working nicely now. Now we could see that the slider wasn't being updated with its game speed initially properly. And that's because the slider only has these points by default. So we can see that the current game speed is set to 2000. But at marker 4, there's only 1000 supported here, and marker 5, 5000. So the idea with this world speed control is that it was only ever meant to allow specific slider times. So what I will simply do, since the game speed is defaulting to 2000, as things are right now, is I will make sure to add in this extra point of 2000 and then update this to 9. That'll basically be what it is in the future version. And then we hit play, and it should pop in here a little further now. Also, the size of this display needs to be a little bit bigger so the text can show. But let's hit play, and okay, now it's looking proper. We can increase the time speed. There we have the little wave and rainbow effect if we go to crazy speeds. And you can drop it all the way back down to 0. So I will be sure to add that little patch in for the slider. But aside from that, you can see everything else in the system is working nicely. The transitions between the lighting are working really well. And in the background, all of this data is being saved inside of the time state. and the aging state as well. Okay, so one thing I didn't cover in this video is aging components. So if you have an aging component inside of your game, then you can see that it references the world state. You create a new age state for this component specifically. And if you want to replace this scene or another scene at a specific age threshold, then you can create a scene replacement resource. So this resource actually just replaces the aged scene replacement script from before, which was a separate node. But now it just basically is part of the aging component script. But this particular project doesn't really have that as a demo. So I will definitely create a separate video on setting up aging components if you want to have them age as time goes on, and doing a scene replacement after the age reaches a certain threshold. So basically this threshold here would be matched against the current age. If the current age reaches the threshold, then it would do the scene replacement in a nutshell. And aside from that, it's just putting in the settings for the scene replacement, but I'll make that a separate video. And with the add after game seconds component and add when aging component are added to your scenes, and you want to add values after game seconds or aging, you would just reference the time and aging states instead of the signal buses from before. So that stuff I'll cover once again in another video, but just a quick reference to that as well, since that is part of the plugin that was updated. So that is basically everything you need to know about the updates to the World Time plugin. Hopefully you agree with me that now that most data that you reference inside of the plugin are now resources, it's much easier to save, reference, and maintain all of that. And then those time states and aging states are still going to maintain the signals. So anytime you need to create an event off of those signals, you just reference those states instead of the signal buses. And that's basically it in a nutshell. So I'll create a full 1.0 release video very soon for the plugin. And I'll also be creating little tutorials on how to do certain tasks now that you have the plugin set up. So for instance, I'd like to spawn some enemies when nighttime hits. That should be something very easy to do now that we have the daytime system and the game time system set up. So if you want to read more about the updates or access the store pages for downloading the current version of the plugin, you can find those in the links below. So thanks for watching my video to the end. I've been Chris, and I will see all of you in my future video content.